Magandang umaga. Good morning. To introduce the 𝗩𝗂𝗁 Asian Writers Forum, which is our last major activity for the year, I will read part of our concept paper. Filipinos are no strangers to experiencing various cultures. It is ironic, however, that we happen to be more familiar with modern literature from the West than that produced by our neighbors in East and Southeast Asia. In order to bridge the gap between our literature and those of our Asian neighbors, 𝗩𝗂𝗁, UP Institute of Creative Writing, is organizing a series of fora that will focus on the literatures of Asia. This is being done in cooperation with the UP Center for International Studies. The Asian Writers Forum hopes to create a forum for a Filipino audience to learn about the state of contemporary literature in selected Asian countries. 𝗩𝗂𝗁 will invite respected writers or literary scholars to deliver lectures on the state of contemporary literatures in the different genres and in the major literary languages in their respective countries. Our main speaker for today on contemporary Japanese literature is Professor Shimamura Teru. Shimamura Teru is Professor of Japanese Literature at Ferris University. After completing his study in modern Japanese literature at the Graduate School of Tokyo University, he took a lecturing position at Yoshibi University of Art and Design in 1989. In 1999, he published his first single-author monograph, Modern Japanese Literature on the Verge of a Critical Point. He has written numerous articles and book chapters on a wide range of modern Japanese literary theory, literary/cultural/intellectual history, in particular, proletarian literature. He was the co-coordinator of the International Conference on the Proletarian writer Kobayashi Takiji, held at Oxford University in 2008, and co-edited its proceedings. He also edited The Prospect of Post-Colonial Criticism, which came out in 2005, and many other books and special issues. After the Great East Japan earthquake in 2011, he interviewed the A-bomb survivor and Akutagawa Prize novelist Hayashi Kyoko, which was published as Living as a Nuclear Victim in 2011. Recently, he edited the reprints published by Yumani Shobu of magazines originally published in the 1920s and 1930s. His paper for today is entitled, very interesting, A World Overrun by Man-Eating Demons. According to his abstract, a man-eating demon is walking around the world. This is not a story from the world of comics or anime, and I think in his abstract it is a metaphor for the COVID-19 pandemic. When viewed from the perspective of epidemic and social trends, the fact that the comic/anime work Blade of Demon Extinction, better known among us in the Philippines as Demon Slayer, actually one of my favorite animes at the moment, with its theme of exterminating man-eating demons against the backdrop of the Taisho era, has become a social phenomenon. In the midst of today's corona epidemic, also strongly suggests the possibility of reading it in the context of the epidemic. Shimamura then connects this with the world experience and depicted by the Japanese writer from the 20s, Kenji Miyazawa, through the medium of the Taisho era setting. Professor Shimamura will be aided by interpreter Masa Sawada. Thank you very much for this. Our esteemed reactors for today, I will go through, I will introduce our esteemed reactors for today. The first will be Professor Rommel Rodriguez, who currently teaches at the Department of Filipino and Philippine Literature. He is the author of several books published by the University of the Philippines Press and the UST Publishing House. Aside from writing, he is an active advocate of human rights in the country, especially those of political prisoners. He was an exchange research fellow at the University of Shizuoka, Japan in 2015, and was a director of the UP Center for the Philippine Language. And in 2020, he was awarded the Gawad Chancellor para sa natatanging mananaliksik sa Filipino, yes. And our next reactor will be Matthew Constancio Maglana Santamaria. He is a professor of Asian and Philippine Studies at the Asian Center, University of the Philippines, Diliman. He received his Doctor of Law in Political Science from the Kyoto University Graduate School of Law in 1999. He is currently Assistant Dean for Cultural Affairs and the Editor-in-Chief of Asian Studies, Journal on Critical Perspectives on Asia of the Asian Center. He holds the title of the University of the Philippines Artist. He has published many book chapters, articles, and essays on the themes of ethnic conflict, 𝗪𝗂𝗪𝗪 ethnography, ritual and performance, and dance studies. Dr. Santamaria is also a practicing choreographer in the theater arts. Our last, but not least, our last reactor will be Oscar V. Campomanes, who obtained his PhD in American Civilization from Brown University and is Associate Professor of Literary and Cultural Studies in the Department of English, and holds the Reverend James Donolan Professorial Chair in the Humanities, the Loyola Schools, Ateneo de Manila University. Recent publications include the essay on Filipino visual arts for Sanghaya, Philippine Culture and Arts Yearbook 2020, and an extended essay on the Filipino-American Marxist writer Carlos Bulosan. The book he co-edited with the Filipinist economic historian Yoshiko Nagano and anthropologist Nobutaka Suzuki, Colonialism and Modernity, Remapping Philippine Histories, has just been published by the Ateneo de Naga University Press for this year. We will be having an open forum and will be entertaining questions from the public through FB Live. Welcome to everyone for what will be a great discussion on contemporary Japanese literature and anime. I now have the honor of giving the floor to Professor Shimamura.
Okay, I'm going to start my presentation. At first, I express my great thanks for the preparation and conducting this meeting and for the recount staffs and reactors, professors, and doctors. And today I'm going to talk about a world overrun by man-eating demons, influenza, and death-struck Taisho. My PowerPoint presentation is basically on Japanese based, so very sorry for your inconvenience. But today I have a skillful translator, Mr. Sawada, so I'm not annoyed for the language problem. Then I'm going to start my presentation. A man-eating demon is walking around the world. This is not a story from the world of comics or animation. The epidemic caused by the new coronavirus is not coming to an end, but rather, the spread of the Omicron strain is causing a record number of people to be infected every day in many parts of the world, and even in Japan, which had once shown signs of a love, it is now entering what is known as the 8th wave of large-scale reemergence. Just a couple of years ago, it would have never occurred to most people that this civilized society would be hit by a pandemic of an infectious disease like a relic from last century. However, as the virus quickly spread around the world, the breakdown of the system that had supported the civilized society was exposed to the light of the day. Not only in the direct medical field, but also in the field of production, transportation, and many other areas, the system that we have taken for granted are being overturned one after another, and no one has been able to find a definitive and effective way to deal with these problems. If we look at this from the other side, we can say that the contradictions and the defects that civilized society has suppressed under its system as if they had already been overcome have been brought to light by the spread of this infectious disease, a man-eating demon that no one knows how to deal with it effectively. Just about 100 years ago, in the midst of the Taisho era in Japan, a major infection disease pandemic swept the world. This was the so-called Spanish flu. The first pandemic occurred in 1918 to 1919, and the second pandemic occurred in 1990 to 1920. And together they caused 30 to 50 million deaths worldwide. And in Japan alone, 24 million people were affected, and the number of victims was said to be as high as 380,000 or even close to 500,000. At the time when the existence of the virus was not even confirmed, no one in the world was able to clearly determine what caused the epidemic or what brought it on. It was truly a God-only-knows situation. When viewed from the perspective of epidemic and social trends, the fact that the comic animation work Blade of Demon Extinction, with its theme of exterminating man-eating demons against the backdrop of the Taisho era, has become a social phenomenon in the midst of today's corona epidemic, also strongly suggests the possibility of reading it in the context of the epidemic. The fact that it is a comic anime work with the theme of exterminating man-eating demon against the background of the Taisho era also strongly suggests the possibility of reading it in relation to the Taisho era. Even though the comic was originally serialized in a magazine for boys, it has been made into an animated TV series and a theatrical movie, and has attracted a wide media response. In the shadow of the phenomenon that has aroused widespread media reaction, can we not read a double copy of the cultural representation of the Taisho era, 10 years ago, over 100 years ago, when the Spanish flu was prevalent, and the contemporary cultural representation of the spread of the new coronavirus? If so, in what respect can this be done? In this paper, I would like to approach the above-mentioned questions through a close examination of the literary events surrounding the Spanish flu and epidemic of 100 years ago. This is the resume of my presentation, so I'm going to change my language into Japanese and ask translator Mr. Sawada to translation of my slide. ここから日本語に切り替えて、スライドごとに解説をしていきたいと思います。鬼滅の刃は時代を大正年間に設定して、父の没後、その後を継いで𝗍𝗍行商を正業として暮らす少年、竈門炭治郎の一家が彼の留守中に人食い鬼に襲われて全滅。唯一生き残った妹の禰豆子も鬼と化してしまうというところを発端とする。そしてこの電気ストーリーの前編が鬼と化した妹を何とかして人間に戻し、平穏な生活を取り戻そうとする兄の戦いと、その戦いの最中で確認強化される兄弟の絆というモチーフによって貫かれています。一 人食い鬼に襲われ、その血液を体内に取り込むことによって自らも鬼となるとされるこの設定自体が疫病感染症の発生メカニズムと類似していることはネット上のコミックス批評でも話題となってきたところです。そこから重い感染症に襲われて日常生活を営めなくなった妹に対する兄の献身的な介護支援というテーマに焦点を絞って日本の文学史上の実績を尋ねてみると、やはり大正年間に先に述べたスペイン風邪関連とみられる症状によって学生生活を断念し、入院療養に専念しなければならなかった妹トシのために、花巻から上京し、東京に帰居して身辺の世話を行った宮沢賢治のエピソードが思い浮かびます。こちらが賢治とトシの兄弟像。こちらがかまど炭治郎と禰豆子です。翻訳をお願いします。
The Demon Slayer is set in Taisho era. A boy named Tanjiro Kamado inherited charcoal making business after his father's death. When he was out of home, an orc, the man-eating demon, attacked all of his family members. Only his younger sister, Nezuko, survived, but she became a demon. The entire story is based on the motif of the brother's battle to liberate his sister to a human being and restore a peaceful life, and bond between the brothers and sister that is confirmed and strengthened in the process of the battle. The similarity of the setting of the story and the plague mechanism became viral among internet comic reviewers. That is, the setting in which a person who is attacked by a human-eating demon becomes a demon itself, as well, by taking its blood into their body, is similar to the outbreak mechanism of plague. Furthermore, another motif, which is devotion to the younger sister, reminds me of the episode of Kenji Miyazawa, the motif that a brother devotedly takes care of her younger sister who cannot live normally due to a serious infectious disease can be found in the literature history. During the Taisho era, Kenji Miyazawa left Hanamaki City, northern Japan, and stayed in Tokyo to take care of her sister Toshi, who had to give up schooling and be hospitalized for treatment of Spanish flu-related symptoms. The picture on the slide, left side, are the Kenji Miyazawa and her sister Toshi. The picture on the right side depicts of the Demon Slayers, brothers and sisters.
宮沢トシは上京して日本女子大学校在学中の1918年にスペイン風邪でしばし病床に伏した後、その後遺症とも考えられる症状から発熱して、同年12月20日に東京大学の附属病院に入院しました。急な知らせに母と兄賢治が駆けつけ、翌年1月15日に母が花巻に戻った後は、賢治が一人で都市の入院生活を支えることとなりました。2月下旬に退院となるまで約2ヶ月に及ぶ闘病生活を経て、3月3日に、賢治が再上京していた一羅に付き添られて花巻に戻ることとなります。3月末には卒業の予定だったところでもあり、卒業式に出席することは叶いませんでしたが、日本女子大学校から卒業を認定され、卒業証書の交付を受けています。Please pass it.
Toshi, in early November 1918, she's studying at the Japan Women's University in Tokyo. Toshi Miyazawa got Spanish flu. On December 20th, she was hospitalized in a branch of Tokyo University hospital for a fever that could have been an after effect. Kenji and their mother, 𝗍𝗁, lashed into her. After their mother returned to Hanamaki on January 15 of the following year, Kenji was left alone to support 𝗍𝗁 in the hospital until she was discharged in late February. On March 3, she returned to Hanamaki, fetched by Kenji and their mothers. Although she could not attend the graduation ceremony held at the end of March, she received a diploma.
賢治は都市の病状を事細かに観察、記録して父、正次郎に当てて、報告しています。その様子は現在彼の全集に収録された書簡からつぶさに辿ることができます。東京について最初の12月27日付、正次郎宛ての書簡には、病床での都市の様子や発熱の状況、医師と面会して発熱の状況からチブスの疑いがあるが、チブス菌の反応はないとの報告を得た等のことが記され、29日には専門医の所見として、チブス菌は検出されなかったが、熱の形によれば全くチブスである。気管支より上部に病状があること、すなわち肺炎であることは断言し得るとされたことが書かれております。明けて1月4日付の手紙では、都市の病が超チブスではなく、割合に頑固なる。医師は悪性なると申しそうられども、単に治療に長寿を要する意味にてござそう。インフルエンザ及び肺腺の浸潤、カタルに至らざる軽症状によるものにてと、改めての診断を受けたという事細かな報告を記しております。
Kenji Miyazawa carefully observed and recorded 𝗍𝗫's condition and reported it to his father, Seijiro. All the letters are included in the complete works of Kenji Miyazawa, a new edition, volume 15. In his first letter, dated December 27, he wrote about 𝗍𝗫's condition and the doctor's comment that there were no bacteria of typhus found, although he suspected typhus from the state of her fever. In the letter dated December 29th, he wrote the doctor's diagnosis that the symptoms were clearly the one of typhus. However, the bacteria had not been found, and she obviously had pneumonia. In the letter dated January 4th, he wrote the diagnosis that 𝗍𝗫's disease was not abdominal typhus, but relatively persistent influenza and infiltration in lungs.
ここで、検事に対し、都市の病状について所見を述べた専門医としての𝗍𝗀博士の名が先の両書簡に現れます。𝗍𝗀博士の名前は、その後も1月7日、22日、23日、25日、29日、2月5日付の報告にも登場し、この人物が検事から絶大な信頼を寄せられる対象であったことが示されております。では、この𝗍𝗀博士とはどのような人物だったのでしょうか。𝗍𝗀健三は長きにわたって感染症学の分野を中心に多大な業績を収めた医師・細菌学者です。若くしてこれらの病原菌研究の分野で大きな発見をしていた𝗍𝗀は、ドイツ留学を経て帰国後、国立伝染病研究所、東京市立駒込病院で養殖に就きながら、東大助教授として東大附属病院の内科課長なども兼務するなど、多忙な日々を送り、すでに感染症分野において高い成功を得た存在でした。𝗍𝗫が入院していた病院はこの東大附属病院であり、𝗍𝗀博士に検事がたびたび言及しているのは、彼のこうした評判が知れ渡っていたという背景があります。
Name of Dr. 𝗍𝗀 appears in the series of letters as a medical specialist, indicating that Kenji fully trusted him. So, who is Dr. 𝗍𝗀𝗃? Kenzo 𝗍𝗀𝗃 was a physician and bacteriologist who had eminent achievements regarding infectious diseases. At a young age, he made an important discovery in cholera studies. After studying in Germany, he held important position at the National Institute of Infectious Diseases, Tokyo City Kumagome Hospital. At the same time, he was an associate professor at the University of Tokyo, where he also served as head of the University of Tokyo Hospital, branch hospital of the University of Tokyo. He was already a highly respected figure in the field of infectious disease in Japan. Eiraku Hospital, where Toshi was hospitalized, is a branch hospital of the University of Tokyo. Kenji's frequent references to Dr. 𝗍𝗀𝗃 are based on his reputation.
その𝗍𝗀𝗃には感染症の臨床医師として忘れることのできない若き日の体験がありました。それは同僚の医師が、入院中のチブス患者の患部を切開していたところ、切断した血管から血液が飛散し、たまたま湿気で曇ったため予防メガネを外した顔面に跳ねかかり感染して、そのために亡くなってしまったというものでした。すみません、ちょっと要約しましたのでお願いします。
As a clinical physician of infectious diseases, Dr. 𝗍𝗀𝗃 had an unforgettable experience. On December 24th, 1902, news that 2 suspected plague patients were found at the Tokyo Gas Spinning Company in Honjo Ward, Tokyo, was brought to Kumagome Hospital, where Dr. 𝗍𝗀𝗃 was working at the time. Kumagome Hospital, which had been ordered to establish a system to prepare for an outbreak of the plague, formed a special team led by 3 doctors, Risaburo Yokota, Kenzo 𝗍𝗀𝗃, and Asumae 𝗍𝗀𝗃. They decided to isolate the patient as a closed Honjo hospital in the event of an outbreak. On the following day, the Tokyo City office convoyed the decision that the patient would be hospitalized at Honjo Hospital, and Yokota was assigned there to handle the situation. And early in the new year, on this January 7, 𝗍𝗀𝗃 was also assigned to the hospital, and tragedy occurred there.
はい、着任の2日前に入院した人の切開をしたところ、その血液が同僚横田の顔面にかかり、感染の挙句に横田が亡くなったという事件です。
The incident happened just 2 days before Dr. 𝗍𝗀𝗃's arrival, when Yokota was performing his surgery on one of the female workers who had been hospitalized on January 5th. Blood splashed from a cut blood vessel and splashed onto his face. Dr. Yokota happened to remove his eye protection glasses because the glass got fogged from the humidity. Despite careful disinfection, he developed a fever on January 7 due to the plague by bacillus that had entered his eyes. He finally passed away at 3 p.m. on January 14th.
この事件が患者の血液が体内に取り込まれたことによって自らも感染し死に至るという感染症伝染の典型的な事例であり、鬼滅の刃に描かれた鬼の血液が体内に取り込まれたことによって、自らも人食い鬼となるというメカニズムと同一であるということは再説するまでもないでしょう。
This is a typical case of infectious diseases transmission, in which a person gets infected and die due to the patient's blood being taken into his or her body. It is clear that the mechanism is identical to the one depicted in the Demon Slayer, in which a person becomes a human-eating demon by having the blood of a demon taken into his or her body.
こうした痛切な体験を経ながら感染症研究に打ち込み、後に文化勲章を受けるほどの業績を上げた𝗏木ですけれども、その𝗏木にはもう一つ通俗的な健康法としての𝗏木式呼吸法というものの創始者としての顔があります。時はまさに大正時代で当時流行した数々の健康法の中の𝗏木式健康法として注目されたものがそれに当たります。
While 𝗏木devoted himself to studying infectious diseases and was later awarded the Order of Culture for his achievements, he was also the founder of the 𝗏木method of bracing, a popular health method. In the Taisho era, the 𝗏木method of abdominal bracing, advocated by Dr. 𝗏木, was one of the three major health methods among the many populars in the Taisho era.
宮沢賢治、都市の兄弟もまた、こうした通俗的健康法を体験した事実があります。賢治が盛岡中学4年に在学中の大正元年に、𝗍々木伝元という呼吸法の指導者と出会い、その彼から指導を受け、さらに𝗍々木伝元を花巻の賢治の自宅に招いて、その実演を行ったという記録が残されております。𝗍々木伝元もまた正座法を唱導した通俗健康法の唱導者でありましたが、こうした呼吸法のメソードが様々な提唱者によって日本の隅々にまで広がっていたことがわかります。𝗏木式、腹式呼吸法はそのような通俗健康法の中でも名高い医学者によるものとして広く受け入れられました。すいません、要約しましたが、上にいただいても結構です。
Kenji Miyazawa and her sister Toshi also experienced this kind of common health practice. In a letter to his father, Seijiro, dated November 3, 1912, while Kenji was a fourth-year student at the Morioka Junior High School, he wrote, he visited Mr. Sasaki Dengen and made appointment with him to learn the Seiza method for 1 yen from tomorrow. He is close to Master Shimazu and others and seems to be trustworthy, Kenji said. And in the postcard sent on the following day, Kenji mentioned in his previous letter, he tried sitting method under the guidance of Mr. Dengen. In 40 minutes, his muscle has become automatically active, and he was sure that he would be proficient in the next 2 months.
𝗏木の腹式呼吸法は、彼が10代の学生の頃に接した平田篤胤の国学者ですけれども、日本の江戸時代の国学者平田篤胤の地図の岩屋に発想を得たものであることを𝗏木自身が明らかにしています。𝗏木の述べるところによれば、この腹式呼吸は身体の健康とともに精神状態をも向上させるとされ、動の呼吸と静の呼吸の2通りを習得して後、両者が混然となった教師となれば、この腹の力はいくらでも強くなる。また強いほど良い。腹が硬くなって板のようになる。こうなる。博士自ら呼吸を入れたら腹を打ちながらと 2時間でも3時間でも、否、白衣禅師は終日読み終日書き、終日話しても生むことはないと言われたと、それが成就座がすべての時に及び得るものであることが説かれています。鬼滅の刃においても、鬼滅隊剣士たちが鬼と戦う際に用いられるのが各種の全集中の呼吸であること、さらにそれが一時のものでなく、常にそうした状態が持続される常駐という境地が求められることなど、現実の大正時代に流行したこの呼吸法に相通じる、あるいはこうした各種の通俗健康法に取材したとも考えられるような道具立てが用いられている点は、この作品と歴史的背景との関係を考察するにあたって非常に興味深いものがあります。
Dr. Futaki himself has revealed that his very bracing method was inspired by a thinker or doctor in the Edo era, Atsutane Hirata's work, 𝗍𝗲𝗎𝗀𝗋, which he had led when he was a teenage student. According to Futaki, this abdominal bracing improved both physical health and mental state. And after mastering both dynamic bracing and still bracing, one would have the following state. According to Dr. Futaki, the abdomen became as strong as you want. The stronger, the better. Once your abdomen becomes as hard as a board like this, you will not be tired even if you read, write, talk 2 or 3 hours for all days. Let's go back to the Demon Slayer. Interestingly, the similar setting is used in this work when we consider the historical background of this work. The fencers, attackers of the demon slaying party, use various kinds of bracing of total concentration when fighting demons. Furthermore, they are required to stay in such a condition all the time. This similarity makes me imagine that author might have researched the popular health method in the Taisho era.
それでは話をもう一度宮沢賢治と都市の兄弟の上に戻します。永楽病院を退院しまして、一度は故郷花巻に戻り、母校花巻高等女学校で教壇に立ったこともあった都市でしたが、やがてこれも感染症である結核が悪化し、1922年11月、家族に看取られて世を去ることになりました。都市の死去にあたって賢治が深く悲しみ、同日付で、名作の詩編を書いたことは広く知られております。この詩編ばかりではなく、ファンタジー作品の代表作とされる銀河鉄道の夜でも、主人公ジョバンニとカンパネルナの造形にあたって、この死別体験が反映しているのではないかということは、これまでの多くの論に語られてまいりました。
Let's return to Kenji. His sister Toshi was discharged and returned to her hometown, Hanamaki, where she once taught at her alma mater, Hanamaki Girls High School. But her tuberculosis eventually worsened and she passed away on November 7th, 1922. Kenji was deeply saddened and wrote 3 pieces of poem titled The Morning of the Last Farewell, The Pine Needle, and Silent Lamentation on the same day. It has been widely discussed that this may have influenced the creation of Giovanni and Campanella, the characters of his famous work, The Night of the Milky Way Train, the masterpiece of fantasy.
雪の中で遭難した兄弟のうち、弟は死亡、兄は臨死体験の後生還するという題材を扱った光の素足は、この銀河鉄道の夜の前句作品と考えられてきましたが、山根智子さんの指摘によりますと、この作品は都市が亡くなる前に書かれたものと想定されていまして、 その意味では必ずしも前句作とのみ評価することを前提としなくても良さそうです。その光の素足には次のような一節があります。一郎はみんなと一緒に追われて歩きながら何遍も奈良尾の名を低く呼びました。けれども奈良尾はもう一郎のことなどは忘れたようでした。ただたびたび怯えるように後ろに手を上げながら足の痛さによろめきながら一生懸命歩いているのでした。一郎はこの時初めて自分たちを追っているものは鬼というものなこと、また奈良尾などには何の悪いことがあってこんな辛い目に遭うのかということを考えました。その時奈良尾がとうとう一つの赤い針のある石につまずいて倒れました。鬼の鞭がその小さな体を切るように打ちました。ここでの鬼は地獄の極卒としての羅刹の性質を強く持つものとみられ、人食い鬼とはいささか性質を違えていますが、深い絆と愛情に結ばれた肉親を奪い、責め災難むものとしての鬼というものが登場していることは見逃せません。
Kenji's another work, The Shining Feet, the story of two brothers lost in the snow, has been considered a precursor to the Night of the Milky Way train. In the story, the younger brother, Narao, dies, and the elder brother, Ichiro, survives after a near-death experiences. However, Tomoko Yamane points out that this work is assumed to have been written before Toshi's death, so it is not necessarily evaluated as a precursor work only. In The Shining Feet, there is a passage where a demon appears. Ichiro called out Narao's name many times as she walked with the others, being pursued. But Narao seems to have forgotten about Ichiro. He walked with his hands behind his back as if frightened, staggering with the pain in his legs, trying his best to walk. Ichiro thought for the first time about the demon that was chasing them and what had been wrong with Narao to suffer that much. At that moment, Narao finally stumbled on a stone with a lead ledge and fell down. The demon's whip fell as if cutting his small body. The demon here has a nature of 𝗏𝗪 in Japan as a gatekeeper of hell. It is somewhat different from the human-eating demon. However, I want to emphasize that demon appears here as an existence that takes away the family with whom he has a deep bond and affection.
「ここまで見てきましたように、鬼滅の刃には大正という時代設定を媒介として、宮沢賢治の体験し描いた世界と相通じる要素が多々あることが明らかとなりました。血液感染による感染症、比喩としての鬼の出現、兄弟の絆による力の発揮、呼吸法による身体と精神の向上、さらにその背後に賢治が滑床山の熊をはじめとする作品に描いたような山人と里人、里と大都会の分裂や矛盾といった事柄を、この現代のコミックス、アニメーション作品と近代文学史上異色の表現者である賢治との世界の双方に見出すことができるのです。そうであるならば、それらをインデックスとして、現代からこの大正という時代を見返すことができるのではないでしょうか。このコロナ禍に大ブームとなった鬼滅の刃に、100年前の感染症の記憶が呼び起こされ、重ねられる可能性があるのです。
As we have seen, there are many common elements between the Demon Slayer, a contemporary comic anime, and the world of Kenji Miyazawa, a unique creator throughout the history of modern literature, when paying attention to the setting of Taisho era. These are the appearance of demons as a metaphor for infectious diseases through blood-borne infection, the demonstration of power through the bond between brother and sister, and the improvement of body and spirits through breathing techniques. Furthermore, the division and contradiction between mountain people and villagers and villages and big cities can be found in both. Kenji describes these in his works, such as the Bear of Mount Nametoko. If that's the case, we can use them as an index to look back at the Taisho era. There is a possibility that the demon slayer triggers to recall of the memories of the infectious diseases of 100 years ago and overlap with one another.
ワンパラグラフ取り出して次のところに行きますので、後でそのワンパラグラフを補いますのでお願いします。はい。古来、疫病は鬼人のたたりとされ、また悪霊や怨霊の仕業ともされました。それらはやがて疫病神と呼ばれる神格とされ、様々な姿で図像化されることともなりました。近代医学の普及以前にはこうした疫病の流行に対しては、人々が取ることのできた対抗手段はこうした疫病神を追い払い、または重複するための民族的祭事やのましないでありました。そうした民族的迷信はしかし、近代化途上にあったスペイン風邪流行当時の日本にあっても、完全に払拭されたとは言えませんでした。三河の蓬莱寺では1920年1月29日から2月4日まで、悪疫退散祈祷図行が行われ、参拝者には悪病よけ守護札が配られたといいます。この例に限らず、各地でもこのような疫病よけの家事祈祷の類が民間に行われたであろうことは想像に難くありません。ここに掲げたのは1920年に内務省衛生局によって制作されたスペイン風邪予防のためのポスターです。右側のものが、2月、そして左側のものが12月にそれぞれ数万枚規模で配布されたものです。元は色カラー刷りで当時の当局の力の入れ具合のことがわかるような作りです。この両図には風の神、疫病神、そして疫病神の図像化された姿が採用されております。衛生学医学上の立場から国民に流行病の拡大防止と感染した場合の対応を啓発すべき立場にあった政府内務省の発行のポスターに、こうした疫病神、風の神といったものがあしらわれていた。このような民族学的表彰が色濃く現れていたということに注目すべきであろうと思います。
Since ancient times, plague and disease have been attributed to demons or to evil spirits in Japan. They were eventually regarded as deities called gods of plague and were depicted in various forms. Before modern medicines was adopted, the countermeasures people could take against such epidemics were rituals and curses. Such superstitions were still there when the Spanish flu hit Japan, when the country was in modernization. For instance, a major temple held a prayer for the repelling of evil plague in 1920 and provided guardian cards to worshippers. There might have been similar cases all over the country. In this slide, you can see the posters for Spanish flu preventions. The Health Bureau of the Ministry of the Interior Affairs of Japan made these in 1920s. The actual posters were full color and tens of thousands of copies were distributed. The authorities were quite serious. Both posters feature images of the god of plague. Even the authorities, based on scientific views, use such images. It is evident that the representation of the god of plague remained in people's mind at that time.
100年前にはまだ残暑のあった人食い鬼は、ケッジワールドとパラレルに考えることができる柳田国夫の遠野物語からイモの力に至るまでの大正時代の民族学的発見と記述によって今日まで伝えられることになりました。同じように文明化する当時の言説空間に民族学的疫病画にも確かにその姿を表していたということができます。ワンパラグラフ戻ってきて。
Human-eating demons were still lingering 100 years ago. In the present time, we can know them through the folklore discoveries of the Taisho era, led by Kunio Yanagida's The Legends of Tono, and others that can be considered parallel to Kenji's world. In the same way, another folklore figure, god of plague, was certainly alive in the discourse space in the modernizing stages.
武者小路実篤は大正7年1818年に理想的な調和社会、階級闘争のない世界という理想郷の実現を目指して宮崎の山中に新しき村を建設しました。武者小路は農作業をしながら文筆活動を続け、大阪毎日新聞に友情を連載するなどの活動を行いましたが、1924年に離村し、彼が実際に村民だったのはわずか6年間。その武者小路の企てをあなたは無謀だと批判した𝗩𝗶𝗶𝗪は1922年、農地を解放しますが、その後ほどなくして実施を遂げました。𝗩𝗶𝗪没後の1924年には産業組合法の枠内で産業組合が設立されますが、これもまた苦しい経営が続きました。芥川龍之介の苦悩と自決の要因の一つとして深まる社会の矛盾とその解決方法への模索が挙げられますが、これも武者小路や𝗩𝗫の奇跡と背景を同じくするものと捉えることができます。結論のところ、2パラグラフ、後で自分の方で申しますので、今の例のところだけお願いします。
In 1918, a famous Japanese novelist, 𝗦𝗫 Mushanokoji, established a community called the New Village in the mountains of Miyazaki Prefecture, aiming for an ideal harmonious society without class conflict. While farming, he continued to write, but left the village after 6 years. Since then, he had paid only the membership fee without living in the village. Another novelist, Takeo Arishima, criticized Mushanokoji's plan, saying, "No matter how carefully your plan is prepared and executed, it will end in failure." In July 1922, he provided his farm with all the tenants' farmers for free and afterward, he committed suicide. Later, the limited liability Karubuto Farmers Group Credit Association was established. Land, building, water mills, and other assets were common property and managed by the cooperative. All farmers equally took stakes, but they always had financial difficulty. Another prominent novelist in Japan, Ryunosuke Akutagawa, committed suicide around this time. They said one of the reasons was the deepening contradictions in society and his search for solutions. We can see overlapping among these novelists and their incidents.
Thank you very much for translation, Mr. Sawada. So I'm going back to read my paper's conclusion myself. As we have seen so far, it has become clear that there are many elements in Blade of Demon Extinction that are compatible with the world experienced and depicted by Kenji Miyazawa through the medium of the Taisho era setting. The emergence of demons as a metaphor for infectious disease caused by blood infection, the exercise of power through the bond between brother and sister, and improvement of body and spirit through breathing exercise, and the division and contradiction between mountain man villager and villager military, depicted by Kenji. Furthermore, I believe that the review of literary history from the perspective of understanding the period encompassed by the year Taisho and its literary traces as a chaotic place where complex forces such as the modern nation-state and the communal socio-economic sphere, urban and rural areas, mountain people and villagers, and the productive classes in worker and peasants operates may open the way of clarifying and describing literary phenomena from a different perspective. If this is the case, we can use them as an index to look back at the Taisho era from the present day. There is a possibility that the memories of infectious disease of 100 years ago can be evoked and superimposed on the Blade of Demon Extinction, which became a big hit during the corona disease. 鬼滅の刃 Blade of Demons、ゲゲゲの鬼太郎、妖怪ウォッチ、妖怪大戦争 The Great Yokai War, and Pokemon Pocket Monster. At this time, when these representations of yokai are walking around the world from the Japan of 2022, by analyzing them from the above-mentioned perspectives, we may be able to find a clue connecting the Taisho era, which was hit by the plague god of the Spanish flu, with its inherent complex divisions and contradictions, and the modern era, which is dominated by the man-eating demon of the new type coronavirus infection. I hope that this analysis will provide clues to connect the Taisho era, which was hit by the plague god of the Spanish flu, with the modern era, which is dominated by the man-eating demon of the new coronavirus infection. Thank you very much for listening. That's all for my presentation. Thank you very much, translator.
Magandang araw, 𝗍𝗲𝗁𝗍 gozaimasu, magandang umaga sa ating lahat. I will try my best to speak code switching from English to Filipino, if you allow me to. Thank you for the presentation of our keynote speaker, and I would like to say also hi to our fellow panelists, and thank you for inviting me for this opportunity to at least give my initial reactions for the presentation of our keynote speaker. So I will base my understanding of our keynote speaker's presentation. I think the topic revolves around history, disease, and resistance. sisikapin kong maghanap ng ugnayan ng presentasyon sa konteksto ng panitikan at lipunang Filipino. So retelling the events of the Kaisho era using the contemporary forms such as anime or comics is an effective way on how literature serves as a recorder of history, not only of good events, but also of diseases and pandemics for the current generation of Japanese and Filipino audiences. Sa tingin ko, masasabi ko na marami sa mga henerasyon ng mga Pilipino ngayon ang may access sa Japanese anime. Kasama na rito ang aking mga anak at pamangkin. Bagamat nakatakot yung mga imahen na sa anime at comics, hindi ko lubos maunawaan kung bakit patuloy pa rin nilang itong pinapanood. Ang ilan ay napapanood na ngayon sa Netflix at widely disseminated ito at accessible to all Filipinos, no, na mahilig sa anime. Dito ko nakita sa talk ng ating speaker ang halaga ng kultural at historical na significance ng anime sa kasalukuyan at ang kaugnayan nito sa historical na konteksto ng Japan, lalo na sa panahon ng pandemya at ng mga sakit na naiugnay sa kasalukuyang kalagayan ng ating naranasang pandemya sa COVID-19. Our speaker has laid out the relationship between the two forms and times, so the historical context of the pandemics. What I want to focus now, what is the relation, what is its relation to the literary history in the Philippines. Sa aking palagay, kung titingnan natin yung konsepto ng Demon Slayer, maaari itong gamitin bilang conceptual framework sa panunuring pampanitikan ng Pilipinas. So, ayun na-appreciate ko sa discussion dahil marami rin sa mga folktales at sa mga mito at kwentong bayan ng Pilipinas, marami din sa mga characters dito ay tumutuon sa mga sakit at papaano nabibigyan lunas ito. Sa panitikang Pilipinas, sa tingin ko, maaari itong gamitin conceptual framework yung Demon Slayer na maaari natin saliksikin at dito pumapasok ang halaga ng lokal na kaalamang bayan, yung local knowledge production. I think that's what the speaker also wants to engage us with, no? The production of local knowledge. In our history, si 𝗍𝗫 studied the literary relationship between Japan and the Philippines. Pinag-aralan niya yung folktale kung tutusin, no? Nalathala ito sa isang magazine sa London. Pinag-aralan ni Rizal yung The Monkey and the Turtle at ang kaugnayan nito sa isang Japanese folktale, yung The Fish and the Crab. At nilagay dito ni Rizal ang mga cultural aspect kung paano nagkakaroon ng ugnayan ang value system formation ng Japan at ng mga Pilipino. Sa konteksto ng Pilipinas, marami ding mga kwento tungkol sa mga sakit. Subalit, sa aking palagay, ang mga sakit na ito ay epekto ng kolonyal na karanasan ng Pilipinas sa ilalim ng pamamahala ng mga Kastila ng mga Amerikano. When the colonizers came to the Philippines of the country, they carried out not only their imperialistic agenda, but also the diseases carried out by their bodies of their soldiers. And because the natives were not ready for the new diseases, they were easily infected. So, madaling nagkaroon ng sakit at nahawa yung colony, no, nung dumating yung mga Spanish and American colonizers. Actually, may mga narratives, no, sa ating mga historical documents ang ginagawa ng community para hindi sila mahawa ng sakit, no. Tinatakpan nila yung mga lagusan. Tinatakpan nila yung mga lagusan nila para hindi makapasok directly yung mga missionary, yung mga sundalo, no. So, ayun ang ginagawa nila para hindi sila mahawa ng sakit. Kaugnay nito, sa usapin pa rin ng literary history sa Pilipinas, maraming mga akda ang nalikha sa panahon ng ikalawang digmaang pandaigdig, no? Natipon ito sa mga kwento sa antolohiyang ang pinakamabuting kwento ng 1943, no? Na epekto rin ng programa ng Hapon kung saan ang mga manunulat ay magsusulat tungkol sa rural life, no? Mga kwento tungkol sa mga pesante. gamit ang wikang Filipino. Gayunpaman, gusto kong pagtuunan ng pansin yung isang kwento na isinulat ni Marcel Navarra, isang Cebuano writer, na nagsulat din tungkol sa epekto ng digmaan. Na ang epekto ng digmaan ay gutom o hunger and starvation. No? Ibig kong sabihin, yung sakit ay hindi lamang yung physical na sakit na nakakahawa ng bacteria at virus, kundi yung sakit na epekto ng digmaan. Sa tingin ko, maaari din natin itong tignan sa ating literary history o sa konteksto ng kasaysayan ng Pilipinas. Sa patuloy na ugnayang pampanitikan ng Japan at ng Pilipinas, sa aking palagay, meron ng mga ilang nasalin na akda, no, sa Filipino patungong Hapon. No? Ilan dito ay ang mga akda ni Rogelio Sicat, isinalin ang kwentong Tataselo, na tumatalakay din sa sakit kung tutusin. Ito ay sakit ng sa suliraning panlupa. No? At yung mga kwento ni Wilfredo Bertuccio, yung koleksyon niya ng mga ng kwentong bilanggo, ay naisalin sa wikang Hapon sa aking pagkakaalam. No? At karamihan doon ay tungkol din sa kwento tungkol sa mga bilanggo at tumatalakay hinggil sa mga sakit ng lipunan. No? At makikita natin na mahalaga yung patuloy na pagsasalin ng mga akdang pampanitikan ng Pilipinas tungo sa iba pang wika, partikular sa wikang Hapon, dahil makikita natin na meron na itong historical na ugnayan sa ugnayang pampanitikan ng Pilipinas at ng bansang Hapon. In the current context of the pandemic in the Philippines, literature has become a way for writers to record the specific experiences of the Philippines during the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, ang inyong lingkod ay nangolekta kami o gumawa ko ng panawagan para sa isang antolohiya ng mga dagli o short fiction na tumatalakay sa pandemya sa COVID-19. So naglabas ako ng call for contributions at namangha ako kasi ang daming mga nag-submit ng kanilang mga ginawang akda sa panahon ng pandemya. So anong ibig sabihin nito? No? Isa sa mga paraan para mag-survive, tingin ko ito yung Demon Slayer, no, sa Philippine literature o sa panahon ng pandemya, ay paano magsusurvive ang community, not necessarily by a hero, no, kundi ang paraan para mag-survive yung community ay sa pamagitan ng collective effort to survive, no? Kaya makikita natin yung Demon Slayer ay maaring yung collective, yung solidarity ng community to collectively act on how to survive during the pandemic. So doon ko nakita yung ugnayan ng Demon Slayer na tinalakay ng ating tagapagsalita sa konteksto ng pandemya sa Pilipinas. So siguro sa huli, ang panitikan ay hindi lamang paglikha, kundi paglikha ng ugnayan. Literature is not only a creation of works, but also a creation of relationships. No? At dito ko nakita na kung tinalakay ng ating tagapagsalita ang historical na konteksto ng mga anime, yung cultural significance nito, at yung particular na narrative ng mga doktor o ng mga particular na personahe na isinama niya sa kanyang pagtalakay, ang na-appreciate ko sa talk ay maaari itong gawing lunsaran sa pagbuo ng lokal na kaalamang bayan, lalo na sa konteksto ng Pilipinas, lalo na sa panahon ng pandemya. Sino nga ba ang Demon Slayer, no, sa panahon natin ngayon? Gusto ko ring bigyan tuon na yung literary relationship between the Philippines and Japan is an effective remedy for the two countries that have experienced severe conflict in our history to meet again. So maraming salamat dito sa Asian Writers Forum. At sa tingin ko, mas mauunawaan ko na ngayon ang anime, lalo na sa context ng isang era na tinalakay ng ating tagapagsalita. At malaking tulong ito sa aking palagay tungo sa patuloy na pagsasali ng mga akdasana sa Filipino tungong Japanese at vice versa. Mga akda sa Hapon ay maaring isaling din sa wikang Filipino. At definitely magagamit namin ito sa aming mga pag-aaral sa aming departamento kung paano natin maaring tignan ang mga ugnayang pampanitikan, yung mga partikular no na motif o imahen sa panitikan ng Hapon at sa panitikan ng Pilipinas, kung paano ito magkakaugnay upang makalikha ng mga bagong kaalaman sa konteksto ng Asya. Maraming salamat at muli magandang umaga.
Magandang umaga, good morning, ohayo gozaimasu. I would now like to share my screen to start my comments, my commentary on Shimamura sensei's presentation. But before that, I would like to thank Shimamura sensei for such an interesting presentation. 本当に学んだことがいろいろありますので、誠にありがとうございました。I titled my reaction Demons Within, and I take my points from comparative literature and comparative history between the two countries, Japan and the Philippines. And we are quite certain that the setting of the most important manga and later on anime was actually in the Taisho period. A period of the so-called man-eating demon in the manga, which is in the Taisho historical period is actually a descent into chaos. It is also a period of the Spanish flu, as we have heard from Shimamura sensei, and it is also a period where flaws of the society, the civilized societies, were revealed. Something that is quite similar to what we have experienced in the COVID-19 pandemic. The man-eating demon, therefore, can be a metaphor for an individual's existential crisis, whether a person survives or not. The man-eating demon can also be a metaphor for a collective or national existential crisis, whether the nation survives or not. And of course, the man-eating demon can also be a metaphor for conflict, chaos, and insecurity, which sadly the whole world is experiencing right now with the war in Ukraine, which immediately followed the heels of the COVID-19 pandemic. I would like to point out that the Taisho period in Japan was indeed chaotic. It was indeed a period of trauma, period of sudden external shock. And we see here a picture of the results of the Great Kanto earthquake. So Japan not only had political crisis, it also had ecological crisis, apart from the crisis of the Spanish flu. And of course, trauma that we see now is indeed the COVID-19 pandemic, which again is a sudden external shock, which not only rocked Japan, but also the Philippines and the rest of the world. If we take a look at the two countries, Japan and the Philippines, in the early 20th century, our problems apparently look very similar. We had the problem of modernity. We had the conflict of the modern nation state being pressed onto traditional communities, and therefore we see the retreat of traditional values. We also have political challenges. In the case of Japan, it is the Taisho democracy, which actually had a conflict with the increased militarism, which we saw towards the end of the period. In the case of the Philippines, it is colonialism too, or American colonialism. We also have ecological problems, of course, the Spanish flu, the Great Kanto earthquake, and of course, cholera and tuberculosis, which we saw to be quite rampant in both countries in the early 20th century. I would like to borrow a phrase from our national artist for literature, Reactors B. Mojares. And he says that colonialism is the trauma of Philippine literature. So unlike the case of Japan, the Philippines trauma, great trauma, I believe, is colonialism. And it's also quite interesting that another scholar by the name of Vicente Rafael presents colonialism as something like a disease. You contract it. When you contract, you either make an agreement, or when you contract, you also get it like a communicable disease. So colonialism is our demon, and colonialism is still within us, which we continue to face in the present times. Reactors Mojares talks about the eternal shock, the external shock, the sudden shock which can dislocate the soul and leave the body derelict and disoriented. And I believe that the pandemic, the Spanish flu pandemic or the COVID-19 pandemic, are external shocks that can leave our body politic, the Philippines or Japan, or our individual selves in a state of shock. And this leaves us confused, and this leaves us quite immobile for some time. Reactors Mojares says that the soul loss or soul drift can result from this shock. And soul loss can be temporary, that the started soul can actually be lost. It could actually be exposed to powerful spirits, that it can be taken away to a place and not find its way back. We strike gongs and drums or bang pots and pans, staging a noise barrage, calling out a name. We say, come back, come back. But the soul, believing that the dark tree in which it is ensnared is a luxurious, brightly lit place, in fact, a palace, and the soul has forgotten its name and lost its desire to escape. This is the result of trauma, be it in the form of war, in the form of an ecological disaster like an earthquake, or a global pandemic like COVID-19. We hear from Shimamura sensei that when such horrible things happen, we find some comfort by going back to sources of tradition. He mentions Yanagita, Cunio, and in our own setting in the Philippines, the early 20th century, we have Isabelo de los Reyes. Both of these important scholars look into folklore for the sense of national identity and for solutions to problems that are presented by modernity to each of their societies. And therefore, going back into the sources of tradition, going back into our tales of demons, our tales of goddesses, our rituals, and our methods of healing, traditional methods of healing, we see this as a furlough from modernity and a journey back to tradition, which hopefully gives us many forms of healing and perhaps a way out of the problems that we face in present times. An example of this looking back into tradition was mentioned in this book by Macario Teru, Davao in 1890 to 1910, which is the tail end of the Meiji period in Japan, just before the Taisho period, which is, of course, the beginning of the American colonial rule in the Philippines. In the Davao Gulf area, the Bagobos resisted against American rule by turning to a ritual dance and by performing it in several spots in the Davao Gulf area. This ritual dance actually terrified the American American authorities, and they tried to ban the dance, but they could not, of course. And of course, the resistance eventually led to the assassination of General Bolton, which caps the resistance of the Davaoenos against American rule. When we are confronted by trauma in the form of war, conflict, pandemic, we are forced to ask several questions. And here are three. One is, who are we? What are our core values? And looking forward in the future, what should we be? What should we be for ourselves and for the next generations to come? The pandemic, the Spanish flu pandemic, which inspired the manga, the Kimetsu no Yaiba, and many others, has a parallel in the Philippines. We now have the graphic novel 𝗩𝗲𝗃, which probably results from other forms of trauma, not necessarily the COVID-19. I would say that going back to these traditional sources of our folklore is what we may call the necessary haunting of the soul, be it the Japanese soul or the Filipino soul, because we need to find a way out, find a way back to our humanity. When we are haunted and when we are confronted by trauma, two things can happen. One is we could despair, and we can be indifferent, we can be rendered immobile, and we can isolate ourselves. Or in the Japanese sense, they call it hikikomori. And sometimes this leads to problems like suicide, because the contradictions are so great that the individual could not fully integrate his sense of self with what is happening to his society. But the other thing that can happen is that we can rely on hope. And hope, I believe, unleashes caritas, affection for others, affirms kapwa, which is the unity of self and others, and mobilizes the individual and the collective to act together in order to find solutions to the problems that they face. And we have seen this in our own experience of the COVID-19 pandemic. There was hope. There is hope, and there is a return to humanity. There is regeneration. There is a triumphant rejection of the demons within, the demons of indifference, the demons of despair, and the demons of fear that immobilizes us. We see this in our own example in 𝗩𝗶𝘃 Diliman with our own bakunahan, where we did not only provide vaccination to the community, the stakeholders of faculty, employees, and students, but to the community at large, and even to those who do not belong to UP. And this is a good form of reintegration and regeneration. I would now like to end my brief reaction with these words of hope from the national artist Reactors Mujeres. For literature does give us hope. And when literature delves into the demon within us, it actually commands us to face our demons and to find out how we are going to solve our problems. Reactors says, while it is a soul a writer seeks, it is the haunting of its presence, or its absence, that he does his best work. It is in this haunting that he does his best work. And we should see that in this haunting, whether it is seduction or sin, there are elements in the field where the creator is given the time to flourish. And for as long, and we surely can, prove ourselves strong enough to weave the various strands of this shared experience into a stronger sense of self and nation, we will become fuller and richer. And then, even then, may the possibilities continue to haunt us. The demons are therefore necessary. The demons are therefore there to prompt us to write, to create, and to find solutions to the problems and the traumas that confront us. I end here. 𝗍𝗶𝘀𝗶𝗹. 𝗩𝗏𝗂𝗋𝗇𝗏. And maraming salamat po sa lahat.
Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Good morning to everyone. I wish to thank the 𝗩𝗶𝘀𝗃𝗀 Center of the University of the Philippines and the Center for International Studies for the invitation to join the series of conversations today on the life and literature of our close neighbors, Japan to the north and Indonesia to the south. And I think I also speak for everyone in thanking Professor Teru Shimamura for his really provocative presentation today, a partial typescript of which was provided me in advance for the preparation of my own comments. I shall try to speak slowly and clearly, although I cut up the typescript of my own comments in a series of slides to aid you visually in listening to them. Next slide, please. And I want to thank the staff for screen sharing on my behalf. I take it from Professor Shimamura's presentation today that he is posing the following question. How can the literary address the civilizational through its representations of infectious disease? Next slide. Remarking that a couple years back, quote, it would have never occurred to most people that civilized society would be hit by a pandemic of an infectious disease like a relic from the last century, end quote. He observes how such a public health crisis on a planetary scale, the corona one that is, has upended everything we have always assumed to work in civilized society, crisis or no crisis. Quote, not only in the medical field, but also in the fields of production, transportation, and many other areas, the systems that we have taken for granted are being overturned one after another, and no one has been able to find a definitive and effective way to deal with these problems, end quote. That's from Professor Shimamura. By the latter phrasing, relic from the last century, Professor Shimamura is alluding to a major infectious disease pandemic sweeping the world about a century back during the Taisho era in Japan, resulting in 30 to 50 million deaths worldwide, including anywhere between 380,000 and almost 500,000 casualties in Japan alone. That is to say, the Spanish flu pandemic and its two outbreaks of 1918-19 and 1919-20. Next, please. Civilized society or civilization can then, under such pressures in the past and in the present, revert to its opposite of chaos. In a word, savagery or barbarism. Or maybe it's not so much that chaos, savagery, or barbarism are the opposite of civilization, but they are its dark and other side. This is a quote from Professor Shimamura. If we look at this from the other side, we can say that the contradictions and defects that civilized society has suppressed under its system, as if they have already been overcome, have been brought to light by the spread of this infectious disease, a man-eating demon that no one knows how to deal with effectively. Next slide, please. Yet for Professor Shimamura, I believe, it is not that there was or is civilization able to manage its contradictions and defects, to overcome them under what he calls its systematization, but that civilized society in the present and in the Taisho past is always already pre-configured anyway as, and these are his words, quote, a chaotic place where complex forces such as the modern nation state and the communal socioeconomic sphere, urban and rural areas, mountain people and villagers, and the productive class and workers and peasants operate. I therefore understand what he means by the civilizational as something that is systematized politically and economically, and in terms of what we might call a political economy, whatever the phase of development of it is, from early modern to late, in the contemporary period and in the past. But that system is one riven with contradictions and defects, which infectious disease pandemic can bring to the light of day, simultaneously limiting possible alternatives to it. Crisis can result in change. In our contemporary period, we can understand the civilizational to mean capitalism in its late forms. Indeed, late capitalism is the system most adversely affected by the coronavirus, but which yet again managed to momentarily capitalize on this crisis rather than yield to it and self-destruct. But it is a survival of crisis that foregrounds new ones and forthcoming ones for it, ever worsening and ultimately fatal to such a system that likes to cover itself with impregnability. Next slide. Next slide, please. Returning to the question posed, we might say that it's not only the literary and its cultural representations that can address the problem of the civilizational, broadly and subtly understood, but other discourses as well, such as the philosophical and the political economic, with these discourses actually displaying a certain literariness as part of their own critical purchase. Harvard Business School professor and critic of late capitalist political economy, 𝗩𝗲𝗃𝗀𝗃, for example, resorts to a language of medical pathology and etiology, metaphorically speaking, to describe and analyze related but different phenomena, such as the new political economy of what she calls surveillance capitalism, practiced and now patented by the information technology giant Google, which is a late form of capitalism that has managed its contemporary crises under the pressures of the pandemic without actually resolving them. Next slide. In Professor Shimamura's case, an argument is being made for a text in comics, originally serialized in a magazine and later turned into an animated TV series and adapted for the screen, titled Blade of Demon Extinction, but known locally as Demon Slayer, as presenting us, quote, a double copy of the cultural representation of the Taisho era, when the Spanish flu was prevalent, and the contemporary cultural representations of the spread of the new coronavirus, end quote. Understood, I love this phrase, as a double copy, this literary work, according to him, can correspondingly be subjected to a double reading. The fact that the comics anime work, Blade of Human Extinction, with its theme of exterminating man-eating demons against the backdrop of the Taisho era, has become a social phenomenon in the midst of today's corona epidemic, also strongly suggests the possibility of reading it in the context of the epidemic. The fact that it is a comic/anime work with the theme of exterminating man-eating demons against the background of the Taisho era also strongly suggests the possibility of reading it in relation specifically to the Taisho era. For Professor Shimamura on this account, quote, there is a possibility that the memories of infectious diseases of 100 years ago can be evoked and superimposed on the blade of demon extinction, which became a big hit during the Corona disaster. Now, this is all actually contra 𝗍𝗶𝗶𝗍𝗶𝗋's injunction that the superimpositions between comparable situations from the present and the past cannot furnish us with a radical critique of what prevails, the trauma that haunts us in Matt's terms in our contemporary conjuncture. As Zuboff puts it, the point for us is that every successful vaccine begins with a close understanding of the enemy disease. We tend to rely on mental models, vocabularies, and tools distilled from past catastrophes. I'm thinking of the 20th century's totalitarian nightmares or the monopolistic predations of Gilded Age capitalism. But the vaccines we have developed to fight these earlier threats are not sufficient or even appropriate for the novel challenges we face. I'm concluding. I am, however, completely with Professor Shimamura's expression of hope in the aptitude of parallelisms between the Taisho period in Japan and the contemporary crisis of our systems, mediated by a literary text like Blade of Demon Extinction, as a way to recognize that the novel challenges we face are not so novel after all. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We have heard the lecture of Shimamura Sensei and its productive and incisive presentation about an anime text as related to the Taisho period and its relations to the contemporary period. We've also heard the reactions from Filipino professors and the reactions to the thesis of Shimura Sensei. And now we are opening the floor for comments and questions regarding the issues on literature, disease, and resistance as explained by the speaker and the reactors. You may chat your comments on our FB live stream page, and we will relay this to our panel. But before as we wait for the oncoming questions from our audience, we might as well begin our discussion within the panel ourselves. Maybe we could ask Professor Shimura Sensei with regards to the first reactor, relating the Philippine condition with the Japanese context and our reaction. Would you be able to comment on this? How the similarities in the reaction with the problems with the Philippine situation, like the state nation and the community's reaction to this issue, and maybe we could begin with that.
Okay. I'm okay. Thank you very much for listening. Very eager to my presentation and proper responses. Thank you very much for all the commentators. And I had learned very much from your comment. And at first, I answer Dr. Rodriguez's comment. Very sorry for I'm not very good at Filipino language, so most of the part you speak in Tagalog I couldn't understand, but you explained some parts in English. So in the limit of my understanding, I respond to you. You mentioned that on the basis of a literary history on the Philippines between Philippines and Japan, the difference. And but the information you mentioned was very new for me, so it is very interesting to hear that. The most important problem is how to survive these worldwide pandemic. I mentioned that so as a man-eating demon under the suppress and resistance to the pandemic's influence. The difference between Philippines and Japan and the similarity between these countries are very, very suggestive for me and today's my presentation. And Dr. Campomanes, thank you very much for very proper summarizing of my presentation. And that is what I wanted to say in this presentation. So I appreciate your comment. And the most remarkable point that I feel in your comment is the contradiction on the civilized country, civilized society. That is a process of modernization, and the tradition that is tiered by the modernization's ideas. So it is very important to for the analyzing this problem through the tube of the theory you mentioned. That is, I understand as intersectionality. Some roots, some tools, and some methods is complexly constructed, and we use them as some of convenience, and that once Merleau-Ponty, Reactors said it is very inconvenient tools to use them. So in these suppressed complex situations, we may use our tools of analysis for wide and spreadly. And at last, Dr. Santamaria's mention was very, very suggestive for me because that you said that was almost as I just have said about Dr. Campomanes' mentions, because it is a tier up, tier out of the person to the personality and grouping. So it is a very, very dangerous and critical point in the era. So you introduce 𝗍𝗶𝘁𝗀𝗄's documents, phrases. It was very impressive for me because it is the first time that I contact to 𝗍𝗁's literature. So But most of his opinion, I very sympathize I felt sympathize. The importance of literature is to find hope to the future or society or the community. So you mentioned is very impressive for me. Thank you very much. This is my first response to your comments.
Okay, thank you. With regards to, since you mentioned Professor Santamaria's text as a reaction, would you say that the author's coping mechanism with the crisis, the writing of the texts themselves is equivalent to the dance performance of the 𝗩𝗶𝘀𝗶𝗃 with regards to coping with the crisis brought about by external forces like the infectious disease? Would you say so?
Yeah, that's addressed to me.
Yes.
All right. Yes. Thank you very much for that question. I think human beings react to trauma in many ways, or shock in many ways. And for artists, for writers, of course, if you're a writer, you will write it in the form of a poem or short story, and in this case, a manga form, or maybe even a script. And I think in traditional societies, we do have that traditional reaction to diseases, disasters, and other problems through ritual. And this has already been observed by anthropologists like Victor Turner and performance studies experts like Richard Schechner. And this is not simply a coping mechanism, but actually a way to communicate with the other world. And that's why I say that the folklorists go back to the traditional sources of healing and traditional sources of solutions to present-day problems, that we go back to ritual. We go back with the conversations with the gods, or Shinwa, as Shimamura sensei would point out in his text. And that's why performance or expression is actually an antidote to the destruction that we are being confronted with. So if destruction is war, then creation or regeneration is with creative work, be it in the form of writing or in performance, or in the case of traditional societies, ritual and prayers and other forms of expressions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Santamaria. Also, I'm addressing the same question. Would you say, Shimamura Sensei, that the writing of the anime themselves is a kind of overcoming the trauma and chaos brought about by the disease?
I beg your pardon?
The authors, who's the author? Miyazaki's
Miyazawa.
is
Hayao Miyazaki.
Yes. Would you say the writing of the novels themselves, there are a series of novels regarding it's a kind of coping mechanism for the Japanese author and the readers?
Yes. So I feel that in Hayao Miyazaki's animation movies, in the basis there is some traditional idea, folklorial idea that was stripped in the Yanagita Kunio and the Taisho eras of finding of the traditional regent. So it is one indication of this modern expression of the folklorial presentation in the style of animation, I think.
Okay. Maybe could you react also to Professor Campomanes' comment that the there is what's this? It is not enough to the text that is being produced is not enough to cope with the ongoing crisis, that it is incomplete.
The crisis is not incomplete, but basically, I recognize that the crisis now under the way is the historical, and fundamentally, it is the crisis of globalized capitalism. So it is not easy to resolve these questions. And then we are, I recognize we are on the way of clearing out those contradictions, and we are finding in the root of finding of how to win this very dangerous crisis for all the worldwide seeing view. Okay.
Okay. But there's also a continuing discourse with that. You mentioned some other authors who tried to use the novel form to cope with the crisis with society, and they were not well. We could say that they somehow failed in the attempt. How would you correlate that with the success or the of the Demon Slayer novel?
The author I mentioned in my presentation was basically not a realistic writer. They are not treat demons as main their main themes, but some reflection of the era's ideology is influenced their pieces, and in this COVID-19 era now on, in Japanese literature, some of not few, very quite much of quite many writers and novelists deals in the COVID-19 infection and make pieces during these 3 years.
Okay. How would you say Koji Miyazawa, the author, has was able to express the parallel condition of the Taisho era and with our contemporary?
Yes, because I recognize that Kenji Miyazawa is a very special writer, special literature person in the Japanese modern literature history, because he is not a novelist, not only a novelist, not only a poet, but he is a very worldwide range intelligent person. So his point of view reaches from historical depth to the surface of his era. So it is very interesting to analyze Kenji Miyazawa's literary world.
Okay, thank you, Shimamura Sensei. There are raised hands here. I saw first Professor Rodriguez, and then we hear from Professor Campomanes.
Gandang umaga uli. I would like to hear Sensei Shimamura's comment on how you describe one of the most famous Japanese contemporary writer at the moment is Haruki Murakami, what can you say about his novels? Does he uses folklore with regards to his creative process in writing his novels? And because there are some comments about his writing that most of his influences came from the Western point of view of writing. What can you say about his contemporary literary production as a novelist, Japanese novelist? Thank you.
Short answer to Dr. Rodriguez. I agree with you that the Haruki Murakami, in the Murakami Haruki's pieces, there is some influence of demons, some fairies. In his novels, often appears these demons and fairies. I think that the reason that those characters appears in his novels are because his ideological basis. There is a young schools psychoanalysis. So Jung stream psychoanalysis is very sympathetic to Japanese literary novelists' inner. So some of his stories styles are very similar to Shimamura in the Taisho era. The styles very similar. So it is very much. Apparently, there is a similarity between Taisho era's Japanese literature and Murakami Haruki's modern contemporary literature. Thank you.
Okay.
Professor, yes.
Yes. Before saying my piece, I just wanted to call your attention, Joey, to there's a couple of questions now.
Yes.
And chat box from our live audience. But personally, what I found really provocative and inspiring in Shimamura Sensei's presentation today is the ways in which, for example, the notion of the enemy disease, to use the book's formulation, not just refers to coronavirus in our time or the Spanish flu and the Taisho era, but in fact it refers to civilized society itself, right? Like it's really, this is all about what he terms civilized society, which I might be overreading it. I find as a kind of code word for, like as I did in my comments, for something like late capitalism in our time and modern capitalism in the modernization period since the major restoration in Japan, right? So that if we follow him in his suggestion to do this kind of parallel, discussion as well as comparison, between our time and the Taisho era period in Japan, right? Then something like the enemy disease, the infectious disease, can be thought about a little more broadly. The ways, for example, in which, in the case of the Philippines, for Rommel and Matt in their comments, yung sakit, the disease is one of colonialism, And so therefore, the search for solutions to or vaccines for, such disease, yung ganong sakit ng kolonyalismo, and in our case, sakit ng kapitalismo, becomes quite urgent. So the part actually of Professor Shimamura's discussion in Japanese, which fascinated me and enlightened me, was when he was discussing the search for a health practice or therapy in Kenji Mizayama's time, given kind of the fact that the sister was stricken ill, and how Japanese scientists and biomedical experts started looking for for this kind of therapeutic method including returning to traditional ones. And then his earlier discussion, or a much earlier search for solutions or vaccines by novelists themselves in 2018, like this novelist who set up, right, like this utopic community called the New Village, right, as a solution, right, to the ills of inequality, right, that modernization and the capitalist development of Japan was already in the process of entrenching. But thank you for that part of the presentation.
Okay, before we listen to Professor Santamaria, there are some questions already here from the floor, from Elijah Benjamin Aban. Morning, Shimamura Sensei and esteemed professors. I would like to ask Shimamura Sensei on how did crises like pandemic or natural disasters shape some literary movements in Japan, especially with the proletarian movement led by Kobayashi Takeji and poets like Oguma Hideo.
The Spanish flu, the pandemic of Spanish flu was occurring in 1918 to 1920. So it was before the dawn of the rising of proletarian literature movements. So directly, the proletarian movement couldn't respond to the Spanish flu pandemic. But the rising of Japanese proletarian literature movement, that is the early 1920s to 30s, there is a sensitive feeling between the discrimination or suppressment to the weak people, especially by not sanitary, the people who does not have been kept by sanitary circumstances. So the point of view of the proletarian literature writers concentrates to those the poverty of those peoples. Is that okay?
Okay. Thank you so much. I think we revert to Professor Santamaria's questions.
Yes, it's not a question, but I would like to address Professor 𝗍𝗶𝗀𝗁𝗀's question on what demons do we need to slay in order to appreciate our literature. And again, I would like to go back to the connection between colonialism, because our comics industry actually had a very close relationship with editorial cartooning. Now, editorial cartooning preceded the comics, and there are studies that have been made about this. So there is that connection, and the connection from a mode of resistance and then becoming a popular form. And with this idea of the popular form, I would like to connect now to trying to answer Professor 𝗍𝗁𝗀's question. What are the demons? And there are many. I would like to mention specific personalities, but I will not anymore. Yeah, there are many. But I would like to say that perhaps the continuing internal colonialism that we are experiencing in the Philippines is probably one thing that we need to be aware of, a demon by itself that we need to slay. For example, the high and the low art, the distinction between high and low, which we do not see so much in Japan, because manga is sold in all train stations and everywhere, and it's not considered a low art. Now, the oral versus the written is another divide that we need to bridge. We have a wonderful tradition, form that is so popular now, the flip top, which probably relates to the balagtasan and all, but we are not really giving as much state support for such things. No? The other thing is the Filipino writers and the regional writers divide, because we know that there is a hegemonic center, which is Metro Manila, because most of the publishing firms are here. We don't see that in Japan. In Japan, the publishing firms are all over. You see it in Kyoto, in Fukuoka. You see it in the other cities, but most of the publishing is here in Manila. So I would like now to go back to the idea now why the art is so important to the civilized society. If we look at the word for civilization, it's 𝗍𝗀𝘁𝗍. Boom is actually literature. May is the light, no, something like enlightenment. So civilized society is not civitas or cities, but the learned and the society that can read and write. And that is another demon that we need to slay in the Philippines. How many of us read and write? And as scholars and as writers, how many people actually read what we write? So those are things that we need to slay before we can even go into the higher discourse of Shimamura Sensei. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Santamaria. Professor Sikat has a follow-up question actually. Do you, Luna, pwede mong itanong directly?
Were there new styles that sprung in Japanese writing with the pandemic? Anyone can answer perhaps, but most specifically, I would like to hear the opinion of Professor Teru Shimamura.
Is this the question that I am prepared to answer? So, in Japan, the status of manga culture is very popular and not a second class, but a very, very high class. And in Japan, there is various courses of manga studies in university, and scholar who got degrees about the manga studies are not so few. So I recognize that the manga culture is openly received as a high culture, a kind of high culture to Japanese intelligent society. And so this time I show you in my presentation that some Japanese yokai animations that is very, very popular to Japanese, not only children but also juvenile and adults. So in Japan, the cultural influence of manga artists, manga writers are very high. But not only manga writers, but also proper literal authors, some sort of writers, poems, or journalists have been very active to respond to this syndrome of pandemic of corona COVID-19. These 3 years, there is many magazines special issue that is pointed out coronavirus pandemic, and famous, widely well-known writers gave to the magazine very, very interesting essays and novels, poems. So which is very I think that the interest to the intelligence in Japanese literary world is not very low, quite high, I suppose.
Professor Santamaria has a question. Raised his hand.
Yes, I just want to connect with what Shimamura Sensei just said. In fact, I find the manga, and of course the emergence of demons in manga had always been there, and this is actually can actually be connected to classical literature and classical visual arts, like that of Hokusai. Like Hokusai did a lot of prints in demons, and of course during the Edo period, from of the 16th century to 1868, we see a lot of demon themed plays in the kabuki, as well as in the no theater, prominently the Musume Dojoji. So the demons had always been there. And we see this continuity in Japanese literature that we do not somehow see I might be wrong, but we do not somehow see as consistently in Philippine literature. Perhaps if we try to look for our folkloric sources, for our inspiration, perhaps we will have some kind of a renaissance or a regeneration of reading, and that includes the demons and the Anak ni Zuma and all of those other things. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have. Yes.
Okay. So then I want to ask professors that in the Philippine society, traditionally or historically, the resistance to these disease, pandemic disease, there are some roots that uses traditional folklorial demons to pray them to hide the infections. If you know something about that, please tell me.
Yes, I think Professor Rodriguez has something to say with regards to that.
Yes, I think we must remember the role of the 𝗍𝗂𝘁 in the indigenous communities, who are the social healers. But in the end, they were the ones who were demonized by the colonizers. They were called the Mangkukulam, Hukluban, and then they are the Marites, or the Chismosa of the church. So some of them were demonized during the Spanish colonial system. But I think the significant role of the 𝗍𝗂𝘁 in the healers of the pre-colonial society, we should at least retell their story from the point of view of the Filipinos, of the ones who were colonized, to at least to give a new definition and retell the significance of their existence in the Filipino pre-colonial society, and how the Spanish and American colonizers demonized their role, who were actually the healers of communities during the pre-colonial era in the Philippines.
Thank you very much. I will understand.
With a connected topic would be for Professor Santamaria. How would you connect 𝗍𝗫 with this trend? There is this comics on aswangs, and how would you connect these correlations with the Japanese popular anime?
I will be forced to have a very political interpretation, because 𝗍𝗫 probably got developed during the dark days of the Duterte period, where outrage was not actually expressed by the citizenry on this horrible number of killings in the so-called war against drugs. So I think 𝗍𝗫 is a you can call it a symptom of society, or a genre that somehow exposes the symptoms of our society, the dark side of Philippine society. We always think that Philippine society is not dark, but we actually have the dark side. And I think that dark side is our acquiescence to authoritarian rule and our inability to express outrage when we should do so, when so many people are being killed in our midst. That's how I would connect how I would connect 𝗏𝗏. Somehow it just bled into the pandemic period. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Santamaria. There is a related comment here from Arkin Frani. Since we are on the topic of contemporary media, aside from manga and anime and video games, as a form of modern storytelling, especially those produced and developed in Japan, can be considered canon to Japanese literature. He's asking if manga and anime is canon of Japanese literature. Or Shimamura Sensei?
In some meaning so, but the another meaning no. Because the frame of the Japanese literary history is very strong and rigid, so it is very not easy to breaking out those frames and widen the frame to the manga and animation or another media representation tools. But in the near future, we can we must face to face those change of trend of studies frame. So the era of my disciple or my sons, there would be a change of the frame of Japanese canon, literature canon, widened to videos, animes, and some mangas. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. I think I would like to ask Professor Oka Campomanes to comment on these issues. Would you explicate further the concept of double copy for the text we are discussing? You are on mute. Oka, you are on mute.
Oh, right. Yeah. It can be something like what actually Rommel was saying in Tagalog during his comments about this double lens through which we must look at contemporary literature as well as the literature from the past, right? Which is on the one hand, parang like the lens of context, right? Historical context, and on the other, political cultural framing of, right? Which is, I think, exactly what Professor Shimamura was trying to do with, right, like his parallel approaches to both the Demon Slayer text in the present and to the works of Kenji Miyazawa. Did I get that right? Right. In the 1920s, as well as kind of like the comparable experiences of pandemic earlier, right? During the Taisho period, right after World War I, actually, right after something like World War I, and here in our time, right, like which is that of kind of a capitalism that has itself become viral, you know, through digitality. You know, ganyan. No, so when he, I think by the double copy, the way I understood it was like that like the texts are never are always layered or can be layered, right? You know, that there's their surface, but right, like, but there's I think the word that that is used very well, very aptly by Professor Shimamura is superimpositions. Right? Pages, you know, the texts can be pay
Right,
himself,
right.
right? Whether it's 𝗍𝗻𝗄𝗎𝗪's in the 1920s or right the Demon Slayer manga in the present. I don't know if that responds to your question, Joey, but that's the way I was
Okay,
thinking.
thank you so much, Oka, for that enlightening footnote. We give our moment for our speaker to give his parting words for this lecture. Professor Shimamura Sensei, would you like to say further notes on this discussion? The final say?
Oh, again, I express my great thanks to the professors and audiences. And the addition that I want to make is the very, very important point to think this matter is it must be counted the problem of colonialism. And in Japan, these 150 years of modernization is the conflict between nationalism and colonialism. And in Japan, there is a militarism to the defending militarism from European and America, and offending, invading militarism to Asian states. So this is tear up between these two power ideas. It is important to win those military basic, but we hope to make modernization's contradiction the solution in the worldwide intelligible method, intelligible route to the solution. This is the last comment I want to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shimura Sensei. Thank you for giving us that very insightful lecture. And thank you for the equally insightful reactions of our Filipino professors. I would attempt a synthesis of our foregoing discussion. Our speaker, Professor Shimura Sensei, has talked about the text, the anime of the author Kenji Miyazawa, the Slayer of Demons, and its intersection with political crisis and popular culture and folklore, and how it intervenes with the imagination of the reading public, and how it reflects the Taisho period, and how it is correlated with the still ongoing pandemic crisis in Japan, and how popular culture can adapt to this crisis by stories and reimagination of the folklore, and how the crisis has been represented with the demons, and how these demons can be slayed, or how can we adapt to this chaos that is around us. And also the Filipino reactors, the professors has made the correlation, the similarities between this chaos that is affecting also the Philippines, but in a different light, because the trauma that is affecting the Philippines is different from Japan, which is the colonial trauma, which has affected the production of literature and how it is consumed in the Philippines. Although it's not as popular as in Japan, the comics and the folklore that is being adapted into it as literature has also given the readers the chance to understand the crisis that we are undergoing, and the intersectionalities of literature, politics, history, and this background, the social background and historical background, all impinges on the production of literature, and also literature impinges back on this outside external environment, and we can see the interaction of the authors, how the personal crisis of the Japanese author has helped in the production of the anime, and how this still after 100 years it's still relevant to the reading of literature, culture, and history in both countries can be made and is productive. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us with our Asian Writers Forum, and we are glad that you are here with us and share with this celebration of literature and society and camaraderie between the scholars and the writers. Thank you so much.